Okay, can everybody hear me? You could either respond by microphone or using your chat. Everybody knows how to mute and unmute themselves, right? If you want to unmute yourself to respond to questions verbally, oftentimes that's quicker than typing it out in chat. You could do so. Okay, welcome everybody. How's everybody doing? Pretty good? Not so good at all? Okay. Well, hope you are doing well. I'm not sick with the thing that's going around. I promise. At least I don't think so. But just in case you are wondering where you are, this is Bio 5A discussion. It's part of the Bio 5A series. It has different components from the lecture portion, which most people have been to, the lab portion, which some people are taking at the same time. It's really in a really weird status right now, especially the lab sections. And this one. So these form the fundamental. This forms one of the first bio classes you'll probably take. Is this? I'm assuming this is the first bio class many of you have taken since high school, right? Is this the first bio class you've taken in high school, or have you taken many other bio classes or a few other bio classes? No. So for a lot of you, this is the first bio instruction, bioscience instruction you've taken since high school. So it serves as kind of a fundamental building block. Whether you're a bio major, and I know some of you are, or not a bio major, which some of you might be, this is the foundations in which you'll be building a lot of future knowledge you're going to get into. So hopefully you'll use this to get on the right foot. Okay. Now let's get into this lecture. First off, general information about myself. My name, as you've probably figured out already, is Albert Doe. Here's my email address. You should have also gotten this. A little bit about myself, maybe to make myself more familiar. My day job is doing research. Not the most exciting thing, but I'm working at currently on plant genetics, particularly with in regards to the aspect of plant genetics for the growth and organ development of plants. It's kind of a little bit of a segue for me since I came from an animal background, and the model organism is a model organism that I don't really know much about. I don't really know how to raise plants or take care of plants, but it's been it's been every job has its challenges, so it's just another challenge to adapt to. Genetics kind of is more my thing, but overall it's been great. I've been to a lot of different schools in terms of in the course of my training and my workload. I've been to Cal State Fullerton. I've been to USC. I've been to UCI and a whole bunch of other places. But I think out of all of them, UCR really, really is the best, at least of all the ones that are in the Inland Empire. So it's been a really good campus to me, I would think. And as you, I've also been trying to adapt to this current new lockdown situation that I find myself in. A lot of my work has been in the lab, so I'm no longer able to do it at this point, or I can only do it much more slowly. But a lot of my work has also been on the computer, so not as much change as some other people might be experiencing. So that's me, in case you were curious. Probably not. But in terms of class mechanics, this is an online class. It's new for most of us, I would assume. It takes place through Zoom. If you're here, you're at least basically familiar with Zoom. I've heard of several different video conferencing softwares besi- besides Zoom, such as Skype and Discord. Actually, I've only heard of Zoom very recently once this whole situation started. I guess maybe Zoom must be better than all those other softwares I heard about before because it seems everybody's using it. So, Zoom, we're going to be working with. That's what we have on hand. It works through the concept of online meeting rooms. This is the online meeting room that I'm pointing to that I'm planning to have all my classes in throughout the entire quarter. And I'll try to keep it constant. But due to unforeseen technical issues, this is new to everybody. We may have to change it. So keep abreast of that in terms of announcements. There are possible tech issues in general. We're all trying to get used to this format. One tech issue for me is that my computer has been randomly kicking me off for some reason I can't diagnose. I may get disconnected in the middle of the lecture. I hope that doesn't happen, but just keep in mind that might happen. Okay, I'll try to get on as quickly as possible, but it's something you might need to expect in the future until I could figure out exactly what's wrong with my computer. For the discussion itself, you could think of discussion as kind of a more intimate setting to kind of slide in and get a feel for more of the topics that you've gone over in lecture, but maybe not gone over in incredible detail. Your lecture, whether it's online or it's in person, you have hundreds of students, usually, especially for a basic class such as this. And then you have the professor, and the professor is just one person, and they can't really accommodate one on one communication with all the students. The purpose of the discussion is to partially alleviate that problem because you don't have a hoity-toity professor teaching the class, but rather a lowly grad student, you could provide classroom settings which are a little bit smaller and a little bit more, at least in theory, personalized attention. I definitely find that true in regular discussions, and I will try to make it my goal to make it so in these online discussions. And you will have more interaction with the instructor and more interaction, hopefully, with each other when you're doing your problems and you're doing your assignments. And you could sort of throw things back and forth with the instructor and get more feedback than you would in lecture. That's the purpose of discussion. Hopefully, we'll be able to achieve those goals. In terms of how the discussion itself is laid out, it's very simple. It's going to consist, at least the way I have it now, it might change over time as I try or don't try different things. Where we're going to have a miniature lecture / discussion where I relate the topic at hand and give you some background on it, maybe reinforce the background you got in lecture, hopefully. And then we'll turn on the worksheet, and the worksheet is an assignment that you'll be responsible for turning in on iLearn. You upload it through iLearn about 24 hours after this class, and that's the due date that's set, and then you could check iLearn for the specific date. And those two broad activities should encompass the discussion, at least for now. So those are the mechanics for the class. If you have any question about them, you could contact me, or you could contact Star, who is the course coordinator, or you could contact other TAs to help you work through the mechanics. But it's really simple. Everybody probably understands it. Any questions about this? No questions? Okay. Let's move on to the topic at hand, which is biology, right? Good old fashioned, just general biology. Biology, the study of life. It's a discipline where you study these different processes. So, one of the initial questions that you should ask yourself is, what is life? What is the definition of life? Does anybody have any suggestions or definitions off the top of their head? Feel free to respond through microphone or chat or however you prefer, in a way that I could see or hear. Any suggestions? Don't be shy. Just like put whatever comes to mind. Or do you have any idea of what you might like put forth as a definition? Just anything off the top of your head. Anybody? By the way, if you want to find your chat window, most of you have this control bar. Hopefully you can see the control bar that I'm pointing to. You click more, you click chat, and then that should give you the chat window. So if you want to pull up the chat window, you could do it that way. But does anybody have suggestions or ideas? How would you define life? Nobody? Okay, give me some characteristics of life. Does anybody have characteristics of life? Come on. You must have thought up of something. What are some characteristics of living things? Okay, ability to, you could pull up chat and you could see this, or you could click in with your microphone. Ability to grow and evolve, ability to reproduce. Those are some characteristics, right?
Mm.
So did you have something to say? Something to
To feel something. Oh, wait, I'll just.
Okay, what was your suggestion? Did you have a suggestion? Okay, well, as you can see in the chat, there's several different characteristics that correspond to life, right? Now, keeping these characteristics in mind, what would you consider? Let's look at these different examples, right? Let's look at a fox. Would you consider a fox to be a living entity? Yes, right? There's no real controversy there. What about fire? Would you consider fire to be alive? No. Okay, well, fire, right? It has some characteristics that might make it seem alive, right? It has the ability to grow, right? Do you agree? It has the ability to use energy, right? It seems to respond to stimuli, at least on a superficial level, right? Okay, so fire seems to have some characteristics of life. What about viruses? Would you consider viruses alive or not? No, right? But viruses, right? They have DNA. They're able to evolve. They're able to reproduce, obviously, which is one of the reasons why we're in this situation that we're in right now. Okay, so it's kind of a gray area about what's considered alive or not alive. But when we're talking about the definition, we generally have a list of characteristics, and this is by no means an exhaustive list of characteristics that we look to when we try to define what is life and what is not. So this doesn't really evolve out of an internal set of consistent logic, but rather it's a grab bag of characteristics that we said, okay, this defines life, and anything that doesn't have all these characteristics is not living. If we look at our fox, obviously our fox checks all these boxes right over here. Homeostasis, does everybody remember what homeostasis means? Okay. What would homeostasis be? Okay, regulation of the internal environment. By the way, in case people don't understand what I'm talking about, I'm just looking at the chat, so you could pull up the chat if you need to follow along. Homeostasis, you have a temperature and you want to regulate that temperature in a very narrow band, otherwise you're dead. You have a certain blood pH, you want to regulate that so it's in a narrow band. You want to maintain a constant, stable environment. That's homeostasis. Organization, cells are organized into tissues, tissues are organized into organs. That's a level of organization you typically see in living entities. Metabolism, able to transform energy, break down complex molecules, build up complex molecules. Growth, response to stimuli. If your hand gets hit with a hammer, obviously you want to move away. Adaptation, and then reproduction and evolution as a species, at least, because obviously we know some individuals don't reproduce. And by that, those characteristics, foxes would check all the boxes. Fire, it checks some of the boxes, right? But it doesn't really check all the boxes. It doesn't really have an internal organization of its own. If you see fire, what you regard as fire is mostly combustion and the light and heat that's released from these fuel molecules. So it doesn't really have its own internal organization. Viruses, it's controversial whether they're alive or not. Usually, it seems to have a lot of characteristics of life. In some cases, it has DNA. It utilizes proteins, it reproduces, but it doesn't really have a metabolism of its own. It's responsible on its host for nearly everything, even more than the simplest living organisms that we would consider parasites. Viruses are way more dependent, so they don't check all the boxes, and for most people, they're not considered alive. Although some might disagree. It's a gray area. when it comes to certain things, but it becomes more clear cut once you appreciate all the characteristics and you understand what they are. Okay. So that's the definition of life. Now, we're going to focus on a specific aspect of biology. And this aspect comes in when we consider what biology is. Biology, in a way, is a subset of chemistry. Wouldn't you agree? Right? In certain ways, biology, at least the biology we know, is a set of chemical reactions. So if you're growing, there's chemical reactions involved with that. There's chemical reactions involved with you digesting your food and gaining energy from that food. And these chemical reactions take place through molecules and atoms. And everybody knows what an atom is. Atoms have a nucleus, atoms have electrons. And when it comes to chemistry, we're typically more concerned with what the electrons are doing. Nucleuses are pretty interesting in and of themselves, but that's more of the domain of physics. So chemistry, the electrons can travel around the atoms. They can be shared by atoms and molecules. They can go from one atom to another atom. And this behavior, or at least a big portion of it, is known as the term bonding, right? Not the bonding you see over here, at least not totally, but the bonding you see over here, the molecular bonding. So this molecular bonding is the key to chemistry. And since chemistry underlies biology, if you want to understand a lot of biological processes, you're going to have to understand bonding. So what type of bonds do we need to go over? Well, there's a few fundamental bonds that we want to go over. The first type is the covalent bond, right? The simplest type of bond, sharing of electron pairs. And there's two major types that you should know about. The first major type is the nonpolar covalent bond. And this is where you have bonds between two atoms, and the atoms are roughly the same electronegativity. Does everybody remember what electronegativity means? What does electronegativity mean? What would electronegativity be? If I said something was more electronegative than the other, what would that be? What would that mean? Any clues? It has to do with the electrons. That's a hint. Okay, yeah. So it's attraction of an atom for the electrons, right? The more electronegative an atom is, the more it wants those electrons. In the case of nonpolar covalent bonds, roughly the same electronegativity, so they share electrons equally or roughly equally. And can anybody remember, does anybody know what this compound is? It's methane, right? Methane. So methane, very good feel. Also, you might emit it if you pass gas. So that's an example of a nonpolar covalent bond. On the other hand, you also have polar covalent bonds where instead of sharing electrons equally, they share electrons unequally. You have over here oxygen. It likes to hog its electrons. It's very strongly electronegative. That's partially one of the reasons why you need it so badly. It takes the electrons from the hydrogen, pulls it away, causing a negative charge at the oxygen end and a positive charge at the hydrogen end. And so it's unequal sharing, and this is, of course, water, and this is a polar covalent bond. Ionic bond. Ionic bond is kind of a different degree from kind of the opposite of a covalent bond. It's attraction between ions, but there really isn't as much sharing of electrons seen in the covalent bonds. What it typically boils down to is you have an atom such as the sodium, and this sodium has this lone electron in its shell, and this shell is very unstable because this electron is just here by itself. It wants to go somewhere else. And so this somewhere else would be this chlorine atom. And this chlorine atom has this space, this unpaired electron, and this electron over here will jump to the chlorine, and then it will turn the sodium positive and it will turn the chlorine negative. And since they're opposite charges, they'll attract each other. So that's the ionic bond in a nutshell. Very weak compared to the covalent bond. And yeah, so it's very weak. Can anybody think of an example of an ionic bond? What would be, you could use this. What would this be called? What would its regular name be? Table salt, right? So this is just plain old table salt. You use it in dinner, and ionic bonds are weak. You pour it in water, the salt just dissolves and falls apart, right? So that's ionic bond. And there's a tiny bit of sharing because they're so close together, but not to the degree that you see in covalent bonds. Now, hydrogen bond. Hydrogen bond is a little bit more of a slightly more complex topic, but it's relatively simple, okay? So you have hydrogen in a hydrogen bond, and this hydrogen is connected to an electronegative atom. So this atom pulls the electrons away, giving it a negative charge, and then you have a positive charge at the hydrogen end. So you create what is known as this dipole. And this dipole attracts another electronegative atom. So the way you can find these hydrogen bonds is look here, you have electronegative, hydrogen, electronegative. So that's the sign that you could look for. And can anybody tell me of a substance that does a lot of hydrogen bonding? Water, right? So water over here. It's the most classical example of a substance with hydrogen bonds. And this hydrogen bonding gives it a number of unusual characteristics that you wouldn't see in similar liquids. It gives it, all this hydrogen bonding gives it an extremely high boiling point. So when you see water, it's able to, when you pour water on your head, it's able to cool you off pretty easily without turning to steam, right? You use water to cool off many different things from your face to your car in certain instances. Places next to the beach tend to be have extremely temperate climates because water is a good regulator. It can absorb so much energy by itself, and it's useful because of all this energy and all this energy it could carry. You could use it for a variety of different things, such as cooking food by elevating the water to a high temperature, and that will cook your food very thoroughly. So that's one characteristic which is very important. Another characteristic is that the hydrogen bonding allows the water, when it freezes, to take on a certain conformation. This conformation will actually make ice less dense than water is in its liquid form. So instead of water freezing and then immediately sinking to the bottom, killing whatever's in a body of water or lake when it freezes, instead you have the water freezing on top. And so all the little fishies can be very happy and protected underneath the lake, while humans can ice skate across the lake. So that's another important characteristic of water that hydrogen bonding in part introduces. And if you study more into ecology and evolution, you'll see how that's been very important for preserving life. Another characteristic is that, at least in part, hydrogen bonding it contributes to water's fantastic ability to dissolve many different substances. So you use it as a solvent, it can dissolve these substances, and then it's very important for different processes in your body and also in different industrial processes. So all these characteristics that I described are due fully or in part to hydrogen bonding. So if you want to understand life, you need to understand this very important interaction. Okay, so those are the main types of bonding that you've gone over in lecture and you should know about, at least part of the information you should know about it. Does anybody have any questions on that? No. Everybody get what I just went over here? Okay. Okay, now that we've gone over that, we could go over the worksheet. Let me see. Let me see if I could pull the worksheet up. Okay, so here's the worksheet. Everybody see the worksheet now? Can everybody see this? Okay. Normally, I break people up into groups through the breakout room. But since last class I tried that in, not everybody had their worksheet, so they weren't able to do anything in the breakout room. So for now, at least, we'll just work on it together. And this worksheet you could obtain from the lecture iLearn site, but I have it in front of you. So after this, you could just go get it. But we'll go over it right now. I'm going to work on it by drawing on the screen. You might know how difficult it is to draw by computer, so be prepared for a little bit of illegibility, but I'll try my best. I'll try to make it legible enough for you to at least get a passing idea of what I'm trying to relate. Okay? So let's go. Let me... Okay, so... annotate. Okay, so our first question is this one. What type of bond is formed in O2? You have 4 choices. Which choice should I pick? This one, this one, this one, or this one? Any clues? Non-polar covalent. Okay. Why is it non-polar covalent? Why? Because because the electrons are equally shared, right? The electrons are equally shared because these two things are the same, right? It's just oxygen. So you got a force this way and a force this way, right? So I guess that would be it. Any questions? No? Okay. Next thing they want us to do is they want us to draw the following compounds and then explain the different types of bonding. I'm going to admit something to you here. I've seen this. I've been trying to look up these diagrams, and everybody seems to draw them slightly different ways. So I'm just going to draw them the way I draw them, right? Okay, let's start off with water. What should I put in the center for this? What should I start off with? Oxygen, right? So we have oxygen, and then what should I draw with the oxygen? What should I draw around the oxygen based upon this picture? Shell, right? Okay, so we draw an initial shell. And how many electrons can this shell hold? 2. So you studied your orbitals, right? So two electrons. Oh, by the way, just like as an aside, why do we speak of electron pairs? What is the difference between these two electrons? And why are there 2 electrons rather than just like maybe electron triplets? Does anybody have an idea? So this is basically, you're getting into kind of physics related concepts, right? And you can't have these 2 electrons together because unless they have different spins. So these electrons are basically on the same shell, but they have different spins, so they could occupy this shell together. Whereas you can't have like 3 there really isn't space for triplets or quadruplets of electrons. So that's why we tend to have these pairs in the first shell. And then we also have the second shell. And how many electrons can this second shell occupy? 6. Well, it could occupy 6, right? But what's the maximum? What is the maximum? Okay, 8. So you could fit 8 electrons in here. How many electrons would the oxygen have? 8. Okay, so 8 electrons for the oxygen. So you know that you're gonna only need 2 of these shells. So the hydrogen is going to be somewhere connected to this shell, right? And then you're gonna have another hydrogen here, and the electrons are going to be occupying the shell in some fashion. So how many electrons should I draw in this interaction? 2, right? So drawing 2 electrons over here, and then 2 electrons over here. Remember, this is, what type of bonding is this? What type of bonding do you think this is? Ionic, covalent, polar covalent bonding, right? So polar covalent bonding. And then, so you have 1, 2 electrons here. How many more electrons should I draw in this shell? How many electrons belong in here? 4, 6, 2 more pairs, right? So 2 more pairs. So one electron for the hydrogens. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for the oxygen. So that's water. Does it make sense? Any questions? Any corrections? No corrections? Okay. Let's move on to the next one. This one's lithium. Lithium, a metal which is very important for the electronics you might be on now that you're forced to stay inside. You have lithium over here. Lithium, what should I draw around it? What should I draw around this lithium? Start me off here. You have shells in here, right? What should be around this lithium? Anybody want to volunteer? Okay. How many electrons does this lithium have? Based upon this chart, 3. Okay. So what should I start off with? I start off with the initial shell, right? How many are in here? 2 electrons, right? And then there's going to be maybe an additional shell around here. And then you have what's in here? 1. Okay. Does this look stable to you? No, right? Okay, which brings us to fluorine, right? I can never get the endings right to this. I think it's fluorine. Fluoride, I think, is the charged one, but whatever. You have the initial ring, right? How many electrons would the fluorine have? 9, right? So you fill in the initial, and then you have this one, and you know this one can host 8, so you only need these 2. So you have 1. How many are in this shell, do you think? How many should I add here? Got 1, 2 here, and then how many should I add in here? 7. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, now this is questionable, right? We have this unpaired electron over here. So what do you think is going to happen to this electron? What will happen to this electron? Okay, yeah. So might get a transfer over here. Fill this out. You make this happy. This goes away. And then what would this make, this lithium? What would it do to the lithium to lose an electron? Would it stay the sign? Or okay, so it would change its charge, right? So this would be positively charged. And then what would this be? Negative. So you have positive and you have negative charge. And this would make this what? What type of bond would this be? Ionic. Okay. Any questions on that? Okay, let's move on. Okay, you got your CO2. What should I start off with? Start me off from the very beginning. Carbon, right? And then what do I draw around this carbon? 1 shell, 2 shells, 2 shells. 2 shells. And then we know oxygen is going to be floating around here somewhere. How many shells should I draw for the oxygen? 2. Okay, so you have 2 shells for the oxygen, 2 shells for the carbon. You put an initial pair in each one of them. Okay. You put an initial shell for 2 electrons for each inner shell. And then, okay, now that you have these, what do I do? How many electrons would you expect to find in this shell? Right over here. Based upon what we have for carbon. How many electrons should be floating around the carbon? 4, 6, 8. Based upon the chart overhead. Okay, yeah, so 6. 6, right? So you in some fashion you should find 6 here. Well, let's try the simplest thing. Let's try a single bond. So we have a single bond here and a single bond here. Okay. And then we could add some pair right around here. Does anybody see a problem with this? When we have a single bond? Okay. Not for the carbon, right? Because we could just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Carbon's fine. What about the oxygen? It's kind of, well, the thing is, right? If we kind of have this, then we have sort of an odd thing of an odd number of electrons floating around if we have the pairs, right? So for carbon dioxide, at least, if we want to even it up a little bit, we can instead do, okay, I hope this is really legible so you can see. You could do like a double bond, right? So a double bond over here. So this would count as 2. This would count as 2. And how many electrons would be left to add to this shell for the oxygen? So you got 2 here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. How many electrons will we have left to add to the oxygen for carbon?
4. 4.
4. Okay. Okay, so we have 4 electrons to be added in total. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's carbon dioxide. Okay. And what would be the what would be these bonds? What type would they be? Ionic or covalent? Does anybody have any ideas? Ionic or covalent? They're sharing electrons, so they'd be covalent, right? What about polar or non-polar? How many of you think polar? Okay, how many why would it be polar? Because what? Why would you say it's polar? Okay, why would you say it's non-polar? Okay, the electrons are attracted more to the oxygen, right? So you have a force over here, and then you have a force. By the way, I don't think, I'm not sure, but I don't think it's bent this way. But you have a force over here, right? So it would be non-polar. I'll have to check up on that. I'm not sure whether it's actually bent or not like that.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, so non-polar covalent for the bonds. So that's carbon dioxide. Now methane. Fill me up. What should I do for methane? Carbon in the middle, right? And then how many shells do we draw for carbon?
2.
Yep. 2 shells. And then what do we add on? What do we add on the shell? Where do the hydrogens go? The hydrogens go on the margins, right? So you have hydrogen here, hydrogen here, hydrogen here, hydrogen here. And then how many electrons would be interacting here? How many electrons should I put here? 2. Then 2.
2.
2, 2. Then you have 2 over here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 1, 1, 1. And this would be what? What type of bonding would this be? They're sharing electrons, right? So it'd be covalent. So what type of covalence? Non-polar covalent. Okay. So that's that. Any questions on this? Makes sense so far? Hopefully. You're not going to fail the test if I give it to you right now? Okay. I was thinking of asking the professor, do you think it's a good suggestion to introduce pop quizzes? Yes, no?
No,
Okay, right. Let's see.
I don't know.
I mean, like, sitting here just listening, it might get a little boring. But what do I know, huh?
I find it pretty fun.
Okay. All right. Here it's basically this is trying to figure out whether things are hydrogen bonds or not hydrogen bonds. And we gave a bit of a definition earlier in the presentation. So let's just go over them quickly. Hydrogen bond or not hydrogen bond? Number one.
No, no,
No, right? Because it's just oxygen, hydrogen. Nope. What about two? Hydrogen bond or non-hydrogen bond? Okay. No, right? Because why? Why is it no? Remember, right? When you have a hydrogen bond, the hydrogen should be attached to an highly electronegative atom, and that doesn't include carbon. So the carbon isn't really pulling on that electron very much. So no for two. So you won't get that dipole, and so no for two, and by extension, no for three, right? What about number four? Okay. Yes, no. Okay. Why yes? Why yes? Does anybody have any idea why they put down yes? O is electronegative, right? So O is creating this dipole. But what is the final component that you need? You need something at the other end, right? So is C electronegative? Is C electronegative or not really? This C right over here. Because you see I have this bond, right? Electronegative hydrogen and then what? So would you consider this electronegative? No. Okay. So no. No for four. How about for five? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Electronegative,
yeah,
hydrogen, electronegative. Yes for five. What about six? Yes or no?
No.
No. Just regular covalent. What about seven?
yes,
Yes. Electronegative, hydrogen, electronegative. What about eight?
no,
No. You have carbon right over here. And what about nine? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. Why? Why would you say that? Yeah, okay. So oxygen, hydrogen, electronegative. So 9, yeah. What about 10? No. Okay. So those are your answers. Any questions on that? No questions? Okay. Next thing is basically you're drawing. Yeah, that's right. 5, 7, and 9. Unless like anybody has any disagreements. I mean, I'm not right all the time, and it's been a while for this material. Does anybody have any disagreements? Okay. Moving on then. Now, the next thing you're going to do is we're going to draw water molecules interacting, right? So the first thing we should try to consider is how many hydrogen bonds can a water molecule make? So let's just draw it out. Like we drew before, we have hydrogen over here, hydrogen over here, and then it's electron pairs. So does that look relatively correct to you? It's fine, right?
It's beautiful.
Okay. Well, as beautiful as I can make it. So how many interactions, hydrogen bonding events do you think this water molecule can take? Based upon this picture. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. No, I'm just drawing it out like this to make a point. How many interactions do you think you can make with this? Does anybody have a number? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. There's an interaction that couldn't occur through here, right? So that's 1. There's another interaction that couldn't occur through here, right? So that's 2. What about through the oxygen itself? How many interactions do you think you can make? So it can interact this way, okay? So basically you just draw it out as fitting this diagram, and there's tons of different ways you could do it. One possible way is you can simply just do this. And then, of course, you draw out the hydrogens, although I don't feel like doing it here. And then this would be an interaction, this would be an interaction, and this would be an interaction. Okay? Any questions at all about that? Any corrections to me? No? Is this understandable to everybody? Chat? Is it understandable to you, chat? Yes. Okay, good. Good, okay. So that is the worksheet. It's pretty simple, huh? Pretty simple. Okay, so that's a worksheet. Remember to turn it in. The due date, I think it's 24 hours from now. You're gonna have to check iLearn for that. But fill it out, turn it in, and that's pretty much the discussion. So if you have any questions, I'm gonna be on here for a little while. You could ask your questions, or you could ask your questions through email. If you have any deeper concerns or you have any suggestions you want to make or about the mechanics, you could contact me through email, or we could work something out. Okay, so hopefully you got something productive from this. I'll see you guys next time, or I'll talk with you right now or a little bit later on about any questions or concerns you might have. Okay, so that's it. Hang around, don't hang around. Work on the worksheet and get it turned in. Okay. So I'm just gonna hang around here for a little bit.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
For the worksheets, do we have to like print it out and do it, or can we just write like the questions on a piece of paper and then send that in?
Well, there's a number of different options you could take, right? You could either print it out and then scan it back in, or you could work on it on your computer. I don't think turning in a hard copy, I haven't heard confirmation, but I don't think you're allowed to turn in a hard copy, because even if I wanted to, I'm not sure if they'd let me accept a hard copy. So you
No, no,
get,
no, I mean like if I wrote the question down on like a piece of paper and then took a picture of like lined paper and sent that in.
you could do that. I recommend you scan it because sometimes photos are really hard to see.
Okay.
Or there's ways you could work on it electronically. Do you have Photoshop?
No.
Okay. Well, I think Photoshop is offered free or at a reduced price. And then there's also a free program such as GIMP or Krita. I think that might allow you to work on the documents electronically. And there's more specialized programs that allow you to draw on the PDF if you have some sort of drawing tablet. Or you could just simply print it out, write on it, and scan it back in.
All right, I'll take a look. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? I'm here if you want to ask them through chat or through audio.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I had to sneeze. Sorry about that.
Okay. So what was your question? Okay. I'm not sure like if you had a question or not, but you could ask me later through email or through chat if you prefer.